Good morning. This is the lecture for Ancient and Medieval History for Thursday, the 28th of October, 2021. The last time we were here, we talked about faith. And I have already indicated to you the role that faith has in any culture. Faith, whether it's faith in freedom, which is one of the few things that still unites almost every American, or faith in a particular God or a particular philosophy, is at the heart of every human culture. Because what faith is about is nothing less than the meaning of life. Why are we here? What should we do with our lives? What is right and wrong, good and evil, acceptable and taboo? What unifies us? What makes us special or exceptional? And the faith that unifies a culture explains all of this. That's what it's for. We in the United States have taken an interesting road the past 240 years. What we've done is, for most of our history, we have rooted ourselves deeply in the Judeo-Christian tradition. But we have been broadly tolerant. We have allowed Jews, we have allowed Catholics, even though it started out as a Protestant. We've allowed Puritans, we've allowed Reformed Christians. In fact, many of the early colonies had particular religious preferences. Massachusetts and Plymouth came together. Rhode Island and Connecticut separated because they were different kinds of Puritans. Maryland was set up as a Catholic colony. New York accepted Jews, along with the first slaves coming to this country in the early 1600s. We have since accepted a variety of new types of Christianity, including Mormonism, and in more recent times, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, believers in Shinto, atheists, agnostics, pagans. As long as you believe in the United States Constitution and the freedom that it stands for, you're welcome here. Can a society that is so broadly tolerant of other ideas stay together? Can a society which allows so many radically different interpretations of what common beliefs might be long survive? Every generation, a free society like ours rolls the dice to determine just that question. Will we, as citizens who are given responsibility for our freedom, will we shoulder the burdens of citizenship, look at our leaders carefully, vote properly, whatever that means? Will we insist that our public officials not be corrupt? Will we insist that our society preserve the structures that allow for freedom? Or will we take easy roads? There is a poem, well, not a poem, a statement on the wall of the class. I think that shows up. It's by a writer named Alexander Tyler, who wrote just before the American Revolution. And he said this about, well, you'll see, it'll be pretty self-evident. A democracy, and he was talking mainly about Athens and other democracies in the past, we hadn't come along yet. A democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the voters discover that they can vote themselves money from the public treasury. From that moment on, the majority always votes for the candidates promising them the most money from the public treasury, with a result that a democracy always collapses over loose fiscal policy, followed by a dictatorship. The average age of the world's great civilizations has been about 200 years. These nations have progressed through the following sequence: from bondage to spiritual faith, from spiritual faith to great courage. I guess I'll explain that. From bondage to spiritual faith. You're a slave by any other name. And you've got nothing to lose because you've got nothing in this world. You have your labor. When you're used up, you'll be thrown away. Since you have nothing to lose, you have a belief. I did cover myself. Shouldn't be in this flashlight. I'm still not apologize. Damn sneaky. Like they don't listen to me or something. All that a slave has is spiritual faith, because they've got nothing else. So faith in something leads to great courage. The willingness to die now for freedom, to overthrow the masters, to break the chains. Okay. From courage to liberty. If you're brave enough and dedicated enough, sooner or later you'll win freedom. From liberty to abundance. Freedom always brings better ideas, more creativity, more advancements. Freedom is wonderful if you have a new idea for a good or a service, a business, or an art form, a book, anything like that. So freedom brings abundance. It brings wealth, prosperity. However, things are about to change. From abundance to selfishness. After a while, people forget what got them to be free in the first place. They forgot the sacrifice. They forgot the common action. They forgot the willingness to be brave and to suffer for your beliefs. Instead, people in a wealthy society actually think they're owed comfort. They're owed a standard of living. They're owed things that will give them what they personally want. So they become selfish, self-involved, self-absorbed. From selfishness to complacency. Like somebody after a big Thanksgiving meal, lying down and watching football. Nothing wrong with that. But you don't pick that moment to decide to clean house or to fix all your problems. Why? Full now. Fat, dumb, and happy. Leave me alone. I want to enjoy it. So, from abundance to selfishness, from selfishness to complacency. If I have all I want, I don't care about anything else. Not really. From complacency to apathy. Apathy is an extreme form of I don't care. Voting. It's hard. You got to look up things. It's not easy because some people lie. And some people have different ideas, and they mean different things by the same words. And, it's so boring. Anyway, can't we just have fun? Well, apathy, which is a complete lack of any serious regard for the public good or for the democracy, leads to dependency. Sooner or later, the people that take care of you are the people that own you. From dependency back into bondage. That's the cycle that Tyler talks about. And in the end, he's not wrong. We've been around for just over 200 years. And if you look around, are there a lot of people with great courage, with deep spiritual faith, who are willing to sacrifice their lives, their fortune, their sacred honor, freedom. Some are. Our military is all voluntary. There are people who work in the police, in the fire services, on ambulances as fire. Those people run towards danger when normal people run away. Without them, we would not be in a good life. No, not at all. So there are still people that are willing to risk their life in order for freedom to continue. But are there enough? Or are most people distracted, selfish, apathetic, complacent, or dependent on others? Every generation in a free society, you roll the dice to see, are you still free? So far, for the most part, the United States has rolled well. We had a civil war. We had 100 years later a civil rights movement that was very divisive. And today we're pretty divided. But we've been through things worse than this before. Will there be enough in America that we all believe in to keep us together through the hard times? Or will we shatter? Or worse, will we be enslaved? All of us. By native dictators or by foreign dictators. The purpose of faith is to remind us what's worth sacrificing for. To remind us that it's not just about our belly interests. To remind us that there are transcendent purposes in life. And if you serve them, you make the world a better place. But if all you serve is your own greed, you don't. You're a parasite. In terms of religion, animism, the belief that everything is animated by its own soul. Most Western animists believe that nature is all alive. Japanese animists, Shinto believers, believe that even the works of man have souls. Polytheism is the belief in a group of human-like gods, like the Olympians, with human characteristics like infidelity and jealousy, and who each have a job description. God of war, goddess of love, goddess of the hearth, goddess of the fields, god of messengers. And if you don't think that messengers deserve their own god, try living without U.S. Postal Service or FedEx or UPS or any of that. It's kind of important. So, we then have dualism, which is the belief that there are two equal and opposite powers contending for dominance. The Persians, Zoroastrians, pre-Muslim religion is that way. Some monotheists confuse their religion with the dualistic religion, and they give Satan far too much power and credit. But Christianity, along with Judaism and Islam, are monotheistic beliefs. They believe in one God, one all-knowing, all-powerful creator God. And the last thing I talked about last time was that you have an assumption in modern times that if it ain't matter, it don't matter. In other words, industrial age society and post-industrial society is fundamentally materialistic because we tend to think that if you can see it, touch it, taste it, smell it, hear it, that it must be real. After all, you can measure it. You can do science experiments on it. You can calculate things. You can quantify things. There's data. But what if you're dealing with something that involves the mind rather than the brain, or the spirit, or soul, rather than the body? In these cases, our society has to masks really slowed down my learning curve. Our science has trouble with that. Psychologists, and I know something about psychology, being a teacher and having worked with people with special needs, really are playing around with a bunch of theories that might work for certain people in certain cases. But psychology is the softest of soft sciences. In other words, it's not like physics or earth science where you heat water and it boils, you cool water and it freezes, and it does so always at certain temperatures. The human mind is not like that. This is why I don't believe in social sciences. Polls say, really, based on which questions to which people, over which period of time, which type of people. With polls, which are the basis of much social science, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have the best questions, if you don't ask the right people, a random sampling of a population, you're going to get garbage data, which some people want. Because some people use polls the way people used to use tea leaves or rolling the bones or other forms of witch doctor fortune telling. They use polls to produce results that suit them. The numbers are illegitimate from the get-go because the numbers test a bunch of flawed polling data. Ancient people and medieval people believed without too much doubt that the physical world we inhabit is limited in reality. And what is much more real is the world of the spirit and the world of the soul. And they did this because, first of all, people lived much shorter lives. They did this because people live much more harsh and brutal and difficult lives than we do. And they did it because they were in control of so little. They understood on a physical level so little that their answers tended to be transcendent ones. We suffer because we are sinful. We suffer because even if we personally are good, the world is flawed and fallen. Different religions explain this differently. But no religion assumes that human beings are good. Human beings can be good. They have to work at it. Today, we have people in industrial age who actually think human beings are good. Yeah, we're born good. We're people. It's so great to be a person. Which is strange to me. I've never understood that. People can be good if they work at it. Being good is always hard. It's never easy. Anyway, any thoughts, comments, questions? Yes?
So, this has kind of been playing out in my head a bit, but if people aren't really born good, then why are so many, children kind of pure children?
Children are innocent. I'm going to give you a subjective answer. I don't know the answer to that, but I will tell you what I think. In certain respects, children are pure and are innocent. Most of them, anyway. Because a child can believe that trusting works. That you can give your trust to someone and that they will rise to the occasion. Most adults realize that trust is much more vulnerable to betrayal than a child. So on the one hand, children don't tend to have the corruption that goes along with so many adults. The self-interest, the willingness to lie to yourself, the willingness to lie and deceive others. A child knows that lying is wrong, at least if they're taught it. So there are very few malicious children, by intent. On the other hand, children are different at different phases. Infants are passive, then they're loud, then they're stinky, then they're passive, loud, and stinky. Then they become around 2. And 2-year-olds are terrible. They don't call it the terrible twos for nothing. And 2-year-olds take, they break, they have no sense of limit, they see, they want, they take. You have to contain 2-year-olds. 2-year-olds reveal some of the darkness in us. It's not thoughtful darkness. It's not, ooh, I'm going to be wicked. It's not that. It's just their nature is harsh. Then as people get older, they go through, again, phases of sociability, phases of unsociability. And if you look at people in middle school age, middle school age people are scary in their ability to believe something totally. The Lord of the Flies is a book about that going wrong, but I have a better example, and a real one. In the 1960s and early 1970s, the communist dictator of China was having problems with other people in his party. So he unleashed what was called the Cultural Revolution. During the Cultural Revolution, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14-year-olds were given AK-47s, little red books with the sayings of Mao Zedong, the dictator, and the power of life and death over everyone in the society. So, every neighborhood, every farm, every village had the Red Guards come through, these young kids with the guns, and everyone who was high was shamed. People like myself, teachers, writers, whatever, were forced to kneel in front of everyone, wear giant dunce hats with our crimes. We're beaten, we're humiliated for hours in front of a crowd until finally we break, and then we cry and we beg forgiveness, and sometimes they say yes, but usually they don't. If they say yes, they have you around as an example. This is what happens when you violate the rules. Mao's little red book. Now, you give that same job to an 18 or a 20-year-old, it's not going to be crazy town. You give it to 13-year-olds, it is. And for 10 years, China bled because they gave Red Guards like that the power of life and death over everyone. And suddenly, everyone was accountable to this little red book and its standards. So, children can be innocent, and they certainly are in certain respects. But they also can reveal some of the darker nature that's just instinctively in us. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for asking.
Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about law, because we're talking about first of all, what is law? A lot of people equate law with justice. And justice is usually depicted as a goddess who's blindfolded and holding scales. And what blind justice is supposed to mean is, it doesn't matter who you are. It matters what you've done. Justice, blind justice, you could be the son of the most powerful man. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you are. It matters what you did. Justice is the difference between righteousness and wickedness, or between right and wrong. But that is not the law. Because justice is a concept. Justice is an ideal. Justice is something that the law tries to live up to but never succeeds. Here's what the law is. Working definition. The law is the line that if you cross, you get punished. The law is the line that if you cross, you get punished. The law is the line that if you cross it, you will get punished. The law tries to be just in many cases, but ultimately, did you do this? It's allowed. Did you do that? Bad, bad, bad. Punish time. So the law describes the limits of acceptable behavior, and it also implies what you do with people who cross those lines. Law is not justice. We may want it to be, but it's not. Now, the most primitive kind of law is the law of force. Might makes right. Me strong. You weak. You do what I say or I pound you. The law of force. Might makes right. It's the law of the bully. The law of the thug. The law of the savage. In the scene from 2001: A Space Odyssey where the ape men learn how to use a club, the guy with the club is in charge. Why? Because he's the guy with the club. And if you don't do what he says, he'll knock you with it. And he has a bunch of followers that also have clubs, but they follow him until one of them gets sick of following him. And then they'll club him. And the clubbery continues up to the present moment. Join the club! Bam! So, the law of force is anarchy. Because everyone, even the strongest among us, has to sleep. And you may never approach the thug bully boss when he's awake, but if you can sneak up on him, get past his cronies, his guards, his lickspittles, with a rock, he's going to die. Now, you still aren't necessarily in charge because his thugs, the cronies that follow him, will probably try to kill you, but maybe not. Maybe you prove you're smart enough to take over. So the law of force is this constant roiling, boiling chaos where everyone is trying to get ahead, where everyone is trying to at least keep themselves free of a boss or be boss. No one is safe. Nothing is secure. Now, civilization cannot exist in an anarchy. This is something that privileged intellectual anarchists don't really get. If you get rid of government, man, we'll all just do the right thing because we won't have government forcing us to get angry at them and commit crimes. If we're all free, dude, we can do whatever we want. And of course, what we want will be good. To which I say, have you ever met human beings? Do you know people? People are not like that. If you don't have laws, I don't know, maybe you have theft. If cities in California say, we're not going to enforce property law anymore. We're not going to prosecute anything that's stolen under what, $800, $1,000, $2,000? I don't know. Depends on the city. You know what happens? Rite Aid and Ulta and other things just get looted. Walgreens, and they close. Because why have a store in a city where people just walk in and take things and nobody goes to jail for it? So there's no deterrent. The law of force, might makes right, is anarchy. So something better comes along fairly quickly. The law of family. Blood calls out for blood. Blood calls out for blood. Blood calls out for blood. The law of family. So let's imagine I have a little sister. And you're a twerp in her grade. And you decide to humiliate my little sister by giving her an Indian burn. Which hurts. She tells me about it. And she's much smaller than you. And you're much smaller than me. So I walk up and say, hey, are you Jimbo? Yeah. You the guy who gave my sister an Indian burn? Yeah. Bam! Don't do that! Okay. You hit my little sister, give her an Indian burn, I'm going to whack you. Then Jimbo's father shows up. Hey, are you that guy that knocked my son on the ground? You wouldn't ask if you didn't know. Right. Bam, 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 pow, and I go down. Then my father comes into it. It escalates to the point where you have clan warfare. Family feud with guns, which is where family feuds originally started, with guns, with knives, with clubs, with rocks. Now, in the United States, in the Appalachian Mountains, after the American Civil War, there was a real family feud between two families, the Hatfields and the McCoys. And both clans, I'm talking extended families here, were almost entirely wiped out over a 40, 50-year period as they just started killing one another. And nobody could stop it until the clans were almost completely dead. The problem with the law of family, okay, I'll start with the good thing. The good part of the law of family is that weak relatives are protected. There is actually some order. If someone comes after somebody in my family with their fists, I'm going to hit them with a club. If somebody comes after one of my family members with a club, I'm going to use a knife on them. If they come after my family with a knife, I'm going to use a gun. Why? Can anyone explain why I escalate? You gave an Indian burn, I knock you down. Why? Why should I not be equal in my response? Why am I overwhelming?
As a deterrent.
Right. You bleep with my family, you're going to bleeping pay. Lots of bleeping going on. So, what people will learn is that Gennario guy's crazy. Don't mess with his relatives, because he'll just go after you with lethal intent, which is exactly what I want to communicate. Terror, ladies and gentlemen, is a form of communication. Terror is a form of communication, and human beings speak terror very, very well. So, by being scary, by being overwhelmingly violent towards anyone who messes with anyone in my clan, there's less violence against my clan. It's like bullies. Bullies in the playground look for weak, isolated people. They're natural predators. They're like cannibals, except they're emotional cannibals. And they go after their own kind. It's never about the lunch money. It's about the humiliation. It's always about the humiliation, the power. It took me a while to learn this, but I did learn it. If a bully messes with you, hurt them. Oh, you may get your butt kicked. You may lose the fight, but hurt them. And hurt them as badly as you can. Why? Because the bully may escalate for a little while. But eventually, bullies aren't bullies because they're brave. They're cowards. They're cowardly opportunists. In the end, most bullies fold when you fight them. If I'm a bully and I want some fun, and I see Weak Willie over here, or Crazy Carla, and every time I mess with Crazy Carla, I get my face scratched up, even though I win the fight, Crazy Carla's a pain in the neck. Weak Willie's a much easier target. So I'm going to go after Weak Willie. If you face a bully and hurt them and demonstrate to their tiny little minds that if you mess with me, you may win or lose, but I am going to make you pay for it by hurting you, I'm less of a target than Weak Willie. Carla's less of a target than Weak Willie. And Weak Willie had better learn. Otherwise, Weak Willie is going to be taken advantage of for the rest of his natural life. The law of family is good because it protects weaker relatives. My little sister is under my protection. But it's bad because it ends up with family feuds. So now we come to the law of the king. The law of the king starts when you have the first kings. You know who are the first kings? They're the guys with armies and priests. The priests say, the gods want this man to rule this valley. And the army says, this guy's going to rule this valley. So between the army and the priests, this guy rules this valley, and we'll call him king. He's royal. Don't want to royal him up. And all kings do this at some point. They say, justice is mine. I, because I rule, am going to dispense justice. So, no more law of family. If I catch you, my army will come after you. The part of the army I call the police. And you will be punished. You'll be fined, you'll be jailed, or you'll be killed. Because you're not just avenging your little sister, you're violating my peace. You're violating my law. The law of the king says that the ruler decides. The ruler decides what's just. The ruler decides what's just. The ruler decides. Now, the ultimate case of royal justice is the Solomonic choice between the two women and their baby. I told you about this. I'll just quickly remind you. King Solomon, son of King David, rules ancient Israel at the height of its power and wealth. And two women come in on court day when the king is acting as a judge. And they're both screaming at one another that this is my child. Silence, says the king's lictor. One at a time, the king gets the story, and each of the women say, it's my baby, that hag stole it from me, give me justice. And there is no way for the king to know who is telling the truth. So the king says, bring the baby, put it on this table. Cute kid. Executioner, she gets the left half, she gets the right. Slice it down the middle. At which point, one of the women goes, and the other woman goes, no, 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 it's her baby, it's not my baby, I'm a bad person, throw me away, just don't harm the baby. At which point Solomon says to the woman that says, don't harm the baby, it's your kid. Why? Because it doesn't matter who the biological mother is at that point. One of the women would rather win the argument, even if it means the baby dies. The other woman would rather lose the argument than see the baby harmed. She's a fit mother. She'll be a better mother. Give the baby to her. That's wisdom. So the law of the king is going to stop a lot of the feuding, but here's the problem. Dan, you mind if I use you as an example?
Sure.
Okay. You are a lazy, shiftless victimizer who enjoys victimizing people. That's why you're a victimizer in this example. Thank you for letting me use it. I picked it because he's so obviously a nice guy. So, you have a night of drinking and victimizing, and a woman ends up dead. And you've been arrested for her murder. Now, you were drunk, because you always are, and you were violent, and it was it's not outside of the wheelhouse to believe that you, who's covered in her blood, killed her.
Oh my God. He would never do this. That's why I'm using him as an example.
I hope you understand. This is evil day, not good day. So, I've got you on murder 1 or murder 2, which is going to convey either the death penalty or life in prison. Unfortunately for me, the Golubiewskis are the second most powerful family in the entire kingdom, second only in power to my royal family. They rule the north. And your father comes to me in confidence and says, look, you know that Dan's a little off. We know he did it. But if you put him on trial and punish him in one of the 2 ways, it's going to humiliate the whole family. This is what you should do, Your Majesty. You should give Dan to us. We'll make sure that he never leaves the family estate for the rest of his life. We'll put him in our own jail. We'll punish him worse than you ever could over a longer period of time. Just please don't humiliate my family by putting my son on trial. At which point, the king has a dilemma. The king can do justice to your victim and put you on trial and either execute you or give you life in prison and risk open civil war. Because if I do that, your father has basically assured me that the North will revolt and I may lose. And even if I win, huge numbers of people are going to die, huge amounts of property are going to be destroyed. Or I could say, to heck with your victim's justice, and I'll give you your family, and I won't have the Civil War, but why would anyone trust me to be a good judge ever, ever, ever again? I'm compromised. I'm flawed. I won't be able to do my royal job anymore. What do I do? And that's a toughie. I hope the king would put you on trial. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Sometimes you won't be put on trial. So the law of the king has the problem that politics will always play a role. They have to. There's no way to avoid it. So the solution to this problem is the law of judges. Judges are professional decision makers about the law. They're usually appointed for life or they're elected. In any case, if you're on trial and there's a judge, I can say to your dad, look, I'm sorry, it's out of my hands. The judiciary is independent. The judges are going to do what the judges are going to do. There's nothing I can do about it. And your father will know it because he knows it, because he understands the way law works. We have the rule of judges. So judges tend to take a lot of the politics out of the equation. However, there's a problem. There's always a problem. You got Judge Branting. And Judge Branting, she's a hanging judge. She believes if you spare the rod, you spoil the child. She believes in harsh frontier justice. And then we've got, I know your name, but I'm having trouble remembering it. Give me your last name. Durkin. Miss Durkin. Yeah, Judge Durkin. Judge Durkin is sweetness and light personified. She believes that you can always use another chance, that mercy is the definition of justice, and that as long as somebody regrets it, you can just let them off with a warning. So, I get brought up on charges that, what crime do we want to have? Not murder. Somebody want to suggest a crime? Arson. Okay.
Arson.
I'm up for arson.
Immediate.
But the arson is fairly minor. I decided to burn a political sign. Whatever. Okay. So I'm a vandal. I'm an arsonist. I burn a political sign. I go into your courtroom and I get an arm chopped off because this is the hand that lit the fire that burned the sign, and it seems totally reasonable. I'll stumpy for the rest of my life. You give me 20 hours of community service for the same crime. And the community service, I don't know, is working with old people, working with cute little animals at the petting zoo. Not really much of a punishment. I like old people and I like the petting zoo. So, is this justice? No, not really. The inconsistency is pretty bad. So, what we come up with is the code of laws, or the law code. A set of rules and standards that all judges need to apply. Here's a crime, arson. Here are standards, first degree, second degree, third degree arson. Is it premeditated? Is it vicious? Do people get killed? All of these things. Now, I premeditated burning the political sign. I intentionally did it, but nobody got hurt. So there are standards that both of you, in the code of laws that you're pledged to follow, have to apply. Now, I still may get a sterner penalty in your court than yours, but it's not going to be beyond a reasonable scope. Make sense? So, let's look at the first law code. And in your notes, you will see that it is the code of King Hammurabi of Babylon. Now, there are two ancient Babylonian civilizations. Hammurabi's Babylon is the first one. Then there's Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, that's the second one. They're also called Neo-Babylonians or Chaldeans. Let's look at Hammurabi's code in your notes. So, 195. If a son strike his father, his hand shall be hewn off. Bless you. But what if dad's drunk and beaten up on mom? Sometimes the only way to protect mom and the other kids is to belt the old man and knock him down. You know what? I'm still going to get my arm chopped off if I'm a son and I knock my old man down. Why? Lots of violence in today's lesson. Why? This is fun. Because a father-son relationship is preparation for what relationship in politics? I'm the son, this guy's the father, he does something I think is wrong, I strike him. As an adult, who's going to be like my father? Anyone?
Like the king.
Absolutely. Father-son relationship is a practice for king-subject relationship. A subject is a person who lives in a kingdom. If I take it upon myself to judge my old man enough to smack him down, as an adult, I might decide that my king is an unrighteous king, a tyrant, and I'll raise rebellion against him. And the king won't have it. Part of any law code's job is social order, to preserve social order. It's not just about justice in the individual case, it is about preserving social order. So by chopping Sonny Boy's hand off, I demonstrate that authority needs to be respected. If it's not respected between a father and son, adult peasants will rebel against me? 196. If a man puts out the eye of another man, his eye shall be put out. Now, what's not stated here overtly is among equals. So I'm going to restate this in a way that you should remember. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a life for a life, among equals. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a life for a life, among equals. Hammurabi's code says an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a life for a life, among social equals. What does that mean? Let's say I'm accused of knocking out Chauncey's tooth. He got lippy. I don't know. Bam! Knocked out his tooth. He puts me in front of the king on trial for assault, which is a crime. I'm found guilty because I'm guilty. Now, if this was the... so what happens is the executioner walks up to me and says, nothing personal, buddy. Bam! And knocks out my tooth. So the same thing happens to me that I did to you, right? How is this different from what the law of family would do? How is this different? Yeah.
The law of family escalates it.
Yeah. If I knocked out your tooth, the Stewart clan would come after me and maybe take off some fingers. Okay? Losing a tooth is bad. Losing fingers is worse. For most people. Unless you're a shark. They don't have fingers, so they can lose all the fingers they want, and they depend on their teeth for everything. So, Hammurabi's code is called an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth justice. And all of you, I'm sure, at one point or another, have seen a license plate, or no, I'm sorry, a bumper sticker that says, an eye for an eye will make the world blind. Yes.
Oh, sharks can actually regrow their teeth back, like...
Yeah, because they got rows upon rows upon rows, and it just pops forward. Good. That's true. Ultimate eating machines, sharks. Okay. An eye for an eye will make the world blind. Modern people think of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth justice as cruel. Why would you want somebody to knock somebody's tooth out? That's so barbaric. Make him pay a fine. Make him do community service. Put him in prison for a little while. You don't know how bad our prisons are. What modern people don't get is that an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth justice is merciful because it limits the judgment to what you're found guilty of. It limits the judgment to what you're found guilty of. If I'm found guilty of knocking out your tooth, the worst that's going to happen to me is I'm going to get my tooth knocked out. It limits justice. I'm not going to get fingers cut off. I'm not going to get shot. I'm not going to get killed for knocking your tooth out. It limits justice. It doesn't escalate. That's merciful. So with respect to those lovely people with their an eye for an eye makes the world go blind bumper stickers, you're not really understanding Hammurabi's code.
Oh, you know what happens if you don't have any teeth?
They'll probably break a bone or something. I mean, they'll find a way. Trust me. There's always a way to break a bone. If you're dealing with a living person. Now, let's see here. So 200. If a man knock out the teeth of his equal, his teeth shall be knocked out. Here we go. 201. If he knocks out the teeth of a freedman, he shall pay 1/3 of a gold mina. A freedman is a former slave. So, if we're having a fight, and I'm having a fight with a lower class dude, a former slave, and I knock his teeth out, I'm not going to get my teeth knocked out because he's a social inferior. I'm going to pay some money. I'll pay a fine. 202. If anyone strike the body of a man higher in rank than he shall receive 60 blows with an ox whip in public. By the way, people die under things like that. Ox whips, big, heavy, because oxes are big and heavy. 60 blows, yeah, you could die of a heart attack easily. So, in effect, if we're equals, eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. If a person who is superior whacks a person who's inferior, they pay some money, no big deal. But if you mess with somebody higher in status than you, you're usually going to die. Or you're usually going to wish you were dead for a while. This is all about reinforcing the social order. It is about preserving hierarchy. And it's a good idea if you want to keep order. I think that's where I'll leave it. We're going to start with the 10 Commandments tomorrow. The Decalogue is what it's called. The 10 Commandments. Any questions, comments, or thoughts? I don't see any. Thank you.